So today we are going to be busting some PCOS myths. And if you don't know who I am, my name is Dr. Cheetah Davda and I'm a women's health coach. So when I was diagnosed with PCOS many years ago, these were the things that I was really worried about. My doctor had said I had to lose weight, I'd probably always have a low mood, and I would struggle to conceive naturally. And I have coached over 500 women with PCOS, and we have had so many amazing successful fertility journeys that I want to share what we've done with them with you, just to really get you the best progress ever. So the first thing that I want to kind of myth bust is, can you get pregnant if you've got PCOS? And the answer is yes, it can naturally happen. And a lot of the time what basically happens is when you've been diagnosed with PCOS, you've probably got very irregular periods. So what you first need to manage to do is to get your period on a monthly. And a typical period cycle is around 28 to 35 days. And a typical period can last anything from 2 days to 7 days. Anything longer than that, it means that something's really imbalanced and it's going to make it really hard for you to conceive naturally. So what we want to do is get the right things in place to make sure that you're actually losing body fat. Because typically with PCOS, you get that PCOS belly. So what that means is that your hormones are going to be imbalanced, and also it's linked to insulin resistance. So once that body fat starts trimming away, your hormones are going to get more balanced, your periods are going to get more regular, and then it's going to be easier to conceive naturally. And everyone's journeys are different. It really depends on your mindset and it really depends on your consistency. But from experience, we find that typically after 3 months of being consistent, you get your periods monthly. And after around 4 or 5 months from day one, that's when you are able to conceive naturally, but consistency is going to be key. So one thing to reassure you on is it can happen naturally. You can also obviously go through IVF and things like that if needed, but I want you to be aware that it is possible and it's with the right approach and being consistent. So if you're great for 1 week and you go off track for 2 weeks and then you're great for 1 week, that isn't going to cut it, and that's not going to be enough to help you conceive naturally, and it's not going to help your fertility journey. And I wanted to go through a couple of things that can really help. So the first thing to be aware of is that your food massively matters. And please do not listen to anyone who puts you in a really massive calorie deficit or tells you to eat less or to move more. That's not what works with PCOS. You also do not need to cut out gluten, and you do not need to cut out dairy. Me, alongside the hundreds of ladies that I've coached, we've never had to cut out any food groups to get to where we want to be. But it is really important to be aware that some foods can aggravate your hormones and make it worse, and then make it harder to shift the belly fat and then harder to balance your hormones for fertility. So things that are going to make things worse are going to be things like having lots of processed foods. Typically, I find, especially in vegetarians, they get drawn to those mock meats because they get told to eat more protein. And all you're doing is messing up your hormones even more. So if you're going for the mock meat, if you're going for corn, if you're going for that Vivera, any of that stuff, it's just going to mess things up and slow you down. There are natural ways to get your protein in, especially if you're vegetarian. And if you're unsure how, then send me a message and I've got hundreds of protein sources that are going to be great for you. And I'm living proof because I'm vegetarian. The other thing that can make things worse is being really reliant on caffeine. And sadly, I find we tend to kind of put a plaster on the problem. So instead of managing our energy levels or managing our sleep, we tend to go for things like the caffeine, because that's going to give us that instant boost, that instant relief. Then the next thing we go for when we're really tired is going to be the sugar. So it's going to be the cakes and the biscuits and the chocolates. And what we need to actually be aware of is these two things, especially paired together, makes things 100 times worse. So what the caffeine does, it can really actually stress your body out, and it can really increase your cortisol levels, which makes it harder to balance those hormones. And then the sugars, especially if you've got insulin resistance, is going to be a nightmare, because it basically means your body's going to be running on just being fueled with lots of insulin just to try and reduce the blood glucose, and then you're just going to be working from a state of stress. So what we want to do is really reduce the stress, really make sure you're nourishing yourself with the right foods, yes, protein is important, but processed foods are not the right protein sources. So you want to be thinking of all the natural proteins that are going to get you there, and it's going to be the processed foods that are really going to not even just mess up your hormones, but they're also going to really aggravate your gut. And something to be aware of is that your gut is linked to your mind, and that's also linked to your hormones. So if you've got an unhappy gut, you've got unhappy hormones, you've also got an unhappy mind, that means you're probably someone who struggles with low mood, anxiety, overwhelm, getting stressed. So the good news is we can actually manage all three of those things by doing the right movement, by having the right food, and also learning to manage to de-stress and to really focus on your sleep. So when it comes to the food side of things, as I mentioned, you do not need to cut out your dairy, you do not need to cut out your gluten. Having it in moderation can be handy, but things that you're probably better being more aware of is going to be having ultra processed foods. They're going to really make things a lot harder. If you're having a lot of caffeine, it makes it harder. Having a lot of refined having a lot of processed sugars like our biscuits, our chocolates, our cakes, and also things like alcohol can really disrupt the hormones. So even if you're someone who's going through perimenopause and menopause, even if you're someone who's got an underactive or overactive thyroid, alcohol hasn't really got a place there. So it's something that we really need to work on. And it's not as easy as saying we want to cut it out or remove it. It's learning to understand, why are we drinking? Why are we going through bottles of wine? What's the deeper root of the issue? Is it actually that we're really unhappy? Is it that we're so tired and stressed that it helps us de-stress? It has to be a reason. And a lot of the time, I know I used to fall for it. I would have had such a hard working week that I felt like the glass of wine was like my treat or my reward. Once you start learning to reframe these things and understand what it's actually doing to your body, literally head to toe, it makes it a lot easier to manage it. Then the next thing I want to kind of debunk myth-wise is about workouts. So a lot of the time I hear things like, don't do cardio if you've got PCOS, it's really going to stress your body out. But what we need to remember is if you have got PCOS, you are at higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes, and you're at higher risk of having cholesterol problems, which means you're at higher risk of having a heart attack. So if you're not doing any cardio, you're not actually looking after your heart, and you're not really focusing on the bigger picture. Yes, too much cardio can stress the body out, but not doing any cardio can then lead to a heart attack. So what we want to do is learn to manage the right things for you, and actually having a personalized approach is key, because what works for one person may not work for another person, and that's when it's so important to get your blood work done, to get it assessed, to get it analyzed, to look at your body as a whole. So where are you picking up on body fat? Is it around your stomach area? Is it around your face? Is it around your chest? Because all of those can imply that different hormones are at different levels, and it's really important to learn to manage them and to balance them. So cardio does have a place. Overdoing it isn't great. Weight training does have a place. Overdoing it can also stress your body out. But what I actually tend to find is start simple and start with something you can keep up with. So something as simple as walking is going to be simple, effective, and realistic, easy to fit in around your lifestyle. And if you're someone who says you do not have time to walk, you really need to reassess your priorities in life, because it only takes 10 minutes to hit 1,000 steps. So if you can't hit 7,000 steps a day, if that means you can't walk for 1 hour out of a 16-hour day when you're awake, you really need to reassess life and think, do I actually value myself? Do I actually value my health? And do I actually want to manage these hormones and take control of my PCOS? And then the next thing I always want to kind of myth bust is that when ladies come to me and say they can't lose weight if they've got PCOS. So I am going to be honest, losing weight is going to be a slower journey. Compared to someone who doesn't have PCOS, you're not going to be that person who's losing 6 kilos in a month. But what you will end up losing is body fat, and you'll lose this at a very good rate. So what that means is your belly fat will start to come down, your clothes will start to feel better, and that's why it's so important to make sure you're not relying on your relationship with the scale weight, because that doesn't actually show you if your hormones are getting better, if you're healthy. It's actually to do with the body fat and how your clothes fit and all the other non-scale victories. So yes, you can lose weight. Again, I've coached hundreds of women to lose 10, 20, 30 kilos with PCOS, but it's not going to be the fast, quick fix that you think it's going to be. it's going to be a long journey, and it can be up to around 12 months for you to lose 10, 15 or 20 kilos. But just be aware, it takes time. And what we're doing is we're building a lifestyle, and we're basically making that mindset switch. So I know when I was diagnosed with PCOS, I thought all of this stuff, I was just misinformed. So I started cutting out dairy, started cutting out gluten, started looking into adoption, started doing weird workouts. I thought I could never lose weight. And then, after working on myself, working on my journey, I managed to go from a size 14 to a size 6 with no restrictions, just doing the right thing for me. And if I can do it, and the hundreds of the other ladies that I've coached can do it, you can do it too. But it's making sure that you're aware of these myths. These are just myths, and don't fall for the things that you always see on social media. So don't fall for things like seed cycling. Don't fall for things that if your period's regular that you're actually ovulating. There's a whole host of other myths that we're going to bust, but that's not going to be today. So keep a lookout on my YouTube channel, and then keep a lookout for the part 2 of myth busting for PCOS. Okay, cool. That's done.